Wait, what? I can do that? This is Eric Bell with Wait, what? Financial matters that matter for business and the people that own them. If you missed last week, we talked about our business-to-business credit with Perrin Hiltrop. You want to catch that one. That was a real good episode. This is Eric Bell. Welcome to this episode of Wait, what? Financial matters that matter for businesses and the people that own them. I'm fortunate today to have Cullen, England, just like the country, England, with me, president of Pacific 8, a financial services company. Cullen's been in the industry for about 3 decades now, specializing in the Chinese, international, and new immigrant markets. He's a chartered financial consultant, a chartered life underwriter, and he also has a master's degree in financial services from the American College of Financial Services. Good to have you today, Cullen.
Hey, welcome. Thank you.
So many questions around this market. I know there's, to me, 2 kind of designations or 2 type of categories when we look at the foreign national market. But I want to kind of talk about, from a definition standpoint, what's a foreign national versus a permanent resident? Can you make that distinction for me?
Sure. A foreign national simply would be someone that lives in a foreign country, and we use China as an example. So they live in China. They may come to the U.S. various times of the year. They may come here. They may own property here. They may do a lot of things here, but they live permanently in a foreign country. They're not here permanently. That would be a foreign national. A permanent resident is someone who's here permanently.
Can you define permanently for me? When you live here permanently, is that 6 months in a day, or what's permanent?
The IRS has some different code words. If you're looking from a standpoint of a financial service, if you want to buy a financial service product, we look at you having a permanent green card, and you're here at least over 6 months of the year.
Okay.
But you would have some kind of a permanent green card, or if you're a citizen, you're fine. But if you have a green card and you're only here a week of the year, you're still living permanently, like in China, you would be considered a foreign national. Although the IRS, I don't have the exact days, but they have like 200 and some days. They have a specific amount of days you're here for them to consider you permanently from a taxation standpoint. So they're a little different from if you want to buy a financial service product. They look at it differently, but there is a certain amount of time, a period you need to be here to be permanent. So when you look at these 2 things, it's kind of unique because they're each treated a little differently from a tax standpoint that a lot of people don't understand. So if I'm a foreign national, again, I live somewhere else, but I just come here once in a while, you're not income taxed. You generally don't have to pay tax on if you had money in a bank account here or whatnot. But there is one tax that those people are not aware of, and that's that the U.S. government will have an estate tax on anything you own that's permanent in the U.S., permanent. So you wouldn't be taxed like on a CD, you wouldn't be taxed on a life insurance policy because that's an intangible asset. But a tangible asset, like if you owned a business, you own real estate here, which a lot of people from foreign countries come here and they'll buy real estate, someplace like Orange County where we are, which is a gorgeous place. In fact, Irvine is the fastest growing area for new immigrant Chinese to come to, so they're buying lots of property here. But a lot of people don't realize that they buy a $3 million property, let's say in Newport Beach, and they die, the U.S. government is going to look at the value of that property at death, and they're going to be taxed at 40% on that property due in 9 months. So in that scenario, they'd own $1.2 million of taxes. Now, none of these people want to pay that tax, and they didn't realize they had it. But in many cases, if they know, geez, I have this problem, there's solutions for them to basically pay pennies on the dollar to solve that particular tax problem. Now, on a permanent basis, if you're permanent here, let's say that you're a permanent resident here, you have a green card, or you're here a certain amount of time, you're going to be taxed totally different. You're taxed just like a U.S. citizen. So in other words, you're going to have whatever your tax bracket is. You're going to have to pay your state and federal taxes, and you're also going to pay estate taxes. But now you're going to have an $11.4 million exemption. So if you're not worth more than $11 million, the government doesn't, you have to pay any taxes. But the problem is somebody from a foreign country who's wealthy, and let's say they're worth 20, 25, $30 million back home, they own houses, they have all types of things, the U.S. government's going to tax you on all your value of all your wealth around the world, less that $11.4 million exemption. So they may have a bigger tax problem if they become permanent in the U.S. and they have a lot of wealth back home.
And then 11.4 is per spouse.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So up to 22.8, basically.
Yes.
I was going to ask you, what does the foreign market look like right now in terms from your perspective?
It's the fastest growing market in financial services. I mean, I've been in the financial services, as you said, about 3 decades, and I've worked in a lot of different markets, but I can tell you the last 5 to 10 years in our market, it's just gone crazy because not just China, but Latin America, all over the world, people are coming to the U.S. and they're partaking in the U.S. economy. And because it's still seen as the safest place in the world. So people come here and they partake in the economy, like buying real estate, and it's just exploding. So I think it's the fastest growing market in financial services. And even though it goes through peaks and valleys, I still think when other countries look at America, they still look at it as a place where I want to go and I want to get engaged with, and I don't think that's going to change in the future.
You talked about assets that they buy. You said businesses and real estate. Are there any other asset classes they buy? A lot of?
That's pretty much it. I mean, technically, if you had an art collection or if you had something tangible like that, but typically real estate is probably the biggest asset that foreign nationals own that's taxable, but some people do end up starting businesses here. And if they're still not a permanent resident, that would also be something to be taxed on.
I've always thought of life insurance as an asset class, too.
It is an asset class, but remember, life insurance is considered intangible. So
Okay.
because it's intangible, your foreign national, it wouldn't be part of their estate. Now, if they're a permanent resident, it would be part of their estate. But if they're a foreign national, that life insurance passes totally outside the estate, goes to the beneficiaries, and they could pay whatever taxable event they may have.
So that's why they would want to buy a life insurance policy in the United States.
Exactly.
Okay.
That, and along with the tax reasons, but also, it's funny, whenever you think about buying stuff, I like clothes, I've always been kind of a clothes horse, and I'll go out and buy a new suit every once in a while. And if I go to a nice place, like let's say a Nordstrom's to buy a suit, and I'm looking at the price tag and it's pretty high, and I look and I say, where's this thing made? And it's not usually made in Honduras or someplace like that. It's usually made in Italy. Same with nice shoes. Women, they go out and they want nice clothes, they want perfume. It's maybe France or something like that. So every country has kind of a niche for what they're known for. The U.S., surprisingly, their niche is financial services. They make the most competitive financial services in the world. So when people travel here, they know they can't get the types of products and the types of features and the costs. They can't get the same thing back in Mexico or Brazil or China or Germany. That's why they come to the U.S. and buy these products, because they're the highest quality products in the world.
So that's why they would buy insurance here versus
Exactly.
buying it in their own
Exactly.
country.
Yeah. If they bought it in their own country, the products aren't going to be as competitive. Another reason why is people want, let's call it security, privacy. When you look at both those issues, security, let's say you're in a country that's kind of third world. Let's say you're in a country that, isn't up to U.S. standards, okay? And you're looking and saying, geez, if I give all this money to this insurance company, are they going to pay the claim? There isn't any regulations. There's no rules in a lot of these countries that there has to be reserving behind the policies they sell you. In the U.S., no one's ever lost $1 from bankruptcy in the history of the U.S. insurance industry. Doesn't mean companies haven't gone out of business, but they usually get acquired by other companies and they handle the claims and whatever. So the reality is the U.S. is heavily regulated, and people like that when they're bringing large sums of money and they're buying products. And so that's one reason. And the other reason is privacy. There's a law out there that just went into effect, a regulation over the last 2-3 years called CRS, Common Reporting Standards. And every major country in the world is part of that except the U.S. So what does that mean? Let's take China again. Let's say I'm a Chinese person and I buy an insurance policy in Singapore, or I buy it in Hong Kong, or I buy it in Germany. Every year, that company that sold the insurance policy has to tell the Chinese government they own an insurance policy, here's the face amount, here's the cash value, here's what it's worth. They have to report that to their government. The U.S. does not currently belong to CRS. So the U.S. is the only place right now where you can buy assets like an insurance policy, and the U.S. is under no obligation to report that to their home country. Now, It doesn't mean if they came to them with a lawsuit, they wouldn't report it, but there's no obligation like there is in other countries every year to have to give that information out. So again, when someone's trying to basically diversify their money into other countries, they like the idea that I can get very safe products, and I got products right now that are very private to my home country. They don't know what I own, and frankly, I'd prefer it that way if at all possible. So that's another reason why people would buy a U.S. insurance policy.
It's kind of reverse of what the United States does. It's kind of the Chinese or foreign national offshore product.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where you have your privacy and it's secret. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're a really interesting spot right now, and that's why I said the market's really hot, because you got privacy, you got very competitive products, you got clients that right now may have some money, they want to get into the U.S. and they want to buy assets in the U.S., and they may own a lot of real estate, and this solves the real estate problem and gives them another asset that, as you know, life insurance is a very incredibly tax-qualified asset in the U.S. A gross tax-deferred, comes out tax-free via loans, so your foreign person would get the same exact features that a U.S. citizen gets. They're buying a U.S. insurance policy, so they get the same exact tax benefits, but God forbid the policy is not even part of their estate. It goes tax-free. So they get tax-free death benefit plus all the tax-free other elements of life insurance. So it's a really, really exciting, I think, situation for a foreign national.
Now, how does that process work, though? Let's say you're a foreign national.
Yep.
You raise your hand, say you want an insurance policy.
Yep.
What's the process?
Well, the process is unique. First of all, in the insurance industry, there's a lot of companies. You've been around. There's I don't know how many, 100, 200, 300, a lot of insurance companies. But there's very few companies that actually work in the foreign national market. There might be 10 to 15 tops that actually work in that market. So first of all, there's fewer choices, and all of these companies require your client to come to the U.S. and do the medical and do the application in the U.S. So you can't do everything offshore and never come to the U.S. So you have to be able to come to the U.S. And they're going to look for certain things. They're going to look for, do you have a connection to the U.S.? Do you have property here? Do you have family here? Do you have assets here? They don't want someone that's just flying in and buying an insurance policy and flying back and never come back to the U.S. again. They want someone that has some types of ties to the U.S. And then you need to financially qualify, which is the biggest challenge in some of these markets because a lot of people from some of these countries really are not comfortable disclosing some of this information. But you do have to financially and physically qualify for the insurance policy. So it's a process, but the companies that are good at this, they pretty much package it so you come over one time and it's a pretty simple process, but your client needs to know ahead of time that they need to have some tie to the U.S., they got to qualify for the policy, and they got to be able to come to the U.S. So if they can't do any of those things, then they're not going to qualify for an insurance policy.
So same application process, same underwriting process.
Same underwriting.
Nothing has to be done here.
Everything's the same, but they do have to come to the U.S. and everything has to be done here from the actual physical to qualify and all the signatures on the applications. Everything has to be done in the U.S.
I think financial advisors are bringing you in quite a bit, but also are estate attorneys bringing you in?
Yeah, I work a lot with estate attorneys just because, again, there's a huge estate tax problem these people don't have. I also work quite a bit with real estate agents because real estate agents are basically the point of entry for a lot of these people. They come in and they work with a real estate agent who shows them properties and they buy them. And these real estate agents have books of business with these clients and they don't bring it up with their clients. And I'm not making a negative statement there, but they don't understand it. A real estate agent doesn't understand that a client that buys 3 or 4 properties may have a $4 or $5 million tax liability. If they knew, they would probably share that with them. So I've partnered with many people in that marketplace that are trying to do the best things for their clients. So they know that I have this tax liability and maybe I need to address it.
Cullen, we talked a little bit earlier, and we talked about Chinese, Japanese also,
Yes.
Vietnamese,
Yes.
people from Mexico. You're
Yes.
working with all.
Yeah, I find the biggest markets are markets where people, and you hit on a couple of them. You hit on Mexico, you hit Vietnamese, you hit China. What do they have in common? They all work in countries where they don't really trust their government for various reasons. Either they're communist countries where they really don't own anything and they want to get some of their money out of their country just to be safe, or Mexico tends to have a lot of corruption. So a lot of these people just say, I've got a lot of wealth. I want to diversify, and the U.S. is probably the place to diversify. So those are 3 countries that are probably at the top of the list. But, Latin America, Russia, there's a lot of things going on in Russia now. It's kind of the same issues. I don't see a lot of business from, more your domesticated countries like Britain and France and that, just because those people feel pretty confident in their countries. Their products are a little better, not quite as good as the U.S., but their products are a little better. I do run across situations where someone maybe comes here and maybe they want to diversify their portfolio on that, but I find most of the business comes from countries where people maybe have some newly acquired wealth. They want to diversify that wealth just because they're not totally comfortable with having all that wealth in their home country.
When you talk about diversifying wealth, I know China has kind of put a lockdown on some of the wealth leaving their country. Are some of the others doing that also?
Yeah, I mean, for example, China right now, you can only get $50,000 per year out of the country. And they've made it harder. In the old days, what they could do is they really didn't track where the $50,000 came from. So let's just say that you were coming to the U.S. and you needed a $200,000 premium payment. You could have 3 of your friends or your family members also contribute. They've kind of shut a lot of that stuff down now. So now it's a lot harder to get money out. If you look at China as a country, what they're focused on, I think, going into the future is trying to create more retail sales within their country, less import-export. So I think they're trying to say, hey, why don't you spend the money in this home country? Why don't you spend it here? But it comes and goes. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder. But there's still ways to do all these things. But it is harder to do these things in these countries countries than it used to be, and we'll see how that all evolves as things go along. I think China and the U.S. right now are looking at a lot of tariff agreements. I think part of that tariff agreement is financial services. They're going to open up China a lot more to insurance. So, I think as certain things change, I think it could get easier, but you just never know what's going to happen in the future, and you just deal with what you have. But there's still a big opportunity, but it has gotten more difficult than it used to be, let's say 5 years ago.
So what do people look at when they want more information on U.S. life insurance policies? Where can they get that information?
I don't know in China on the internet what you can get necessarily, but I know in the U.S. you can just go on the internet and look up some of that stuff. But I think a lot of people in China are dealing with people that either come over from the U.S., Chinese people come to the U.S., or there's operations in China that do a lot of immigration services and a lot of financial services. Those people would have some knowledge about U.S. products and how to connect to them and how to actually go through the process I talked about. If you're in China, that's probably the easiest base. But I do know there's lots of agents now in the U.S. that are of Chinese descent that do go back and forth and have lots of clients they deal with. And then when they come here, they help them through that process. So I think a lot of times with some of these cultures where maybe there's some language barriers, they need to connect with some people in their culture that know some of this stuff to kind of start that process.
We covered a lot. Is there anything that we left out that you think is important, Cullen?
No, I think we covered a lot of things. I think, we kind of hit some of the highlights of why this is a market that's expanding and why there's a real opportunity and, a real opportunity for people that may have some situations that they want to address. And life insurance can be a great solution for that.
Well, and this is a specialized market, too. I want to emphasize that.
Yes.
And you have this specialization
Yes.
or expertise around it. So I really appreciate that and the help that you've given me in the past.
Yes,
Yeah.
I appreciate that. And it's been great to talk to you today.
All right. Well, if you want to get hold of Cullen, please contact me at eb@wait-what.biz. And you can always call me at area code 714-643-2500, and I'm at extension 420. Thanks for being with us, Cullen.
Thank you.